Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. Let me tell you about the absolute nightmare I dealt with last year when my next-door neighbor tried to force me to sell my house to her precious son. I still can't believe the audacity of some people. I'm a 34-year-old software developer, and I bought my house 5 years ago in a nice suburban neighborhood. It's a modest 3-bedroom home with a decent yard, nothing fancy, but it's mine and I love it. I worked hard to save up for the down payment and maintain it well. My neighbor Karen, yes, that's actually her name, moved in next door about 2 years ago with her husband Bob. They seemed nice enough at first, though Karen had this way of making subtle criticisms about my yard maintenance that should have been a red flag. Everything changed when their son Jason graduated college last spring. He was moving back to the area for a job at his father's company, and apparently, Karen had decided my house would be perfect for him. It started with Karen coming over one Saturday morning while I was working in my front garden. "Hi Mike, your flowers are looking lovely," she said with that fake sweet voice I'd come to recognize. "You know, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees. "What's up, Karen?" "Well, as you know, Jason just graduated and he's starting at Bob's firm next month. We've been looking for a starter home for him, and Bob and I think your house would be absolutely perfect." I laughed, thinking she was joking. "Oh, that's funny, but I'm not planning to sell." Karen's smile tightened. "Mike, be reasonable. This house is really too big for just one person. Jason needs the space more than you do. He's planning to start a family soon. We'd offer you a fair price, of course." I stopped laughing. "Karen, I appreciate the offer, but this is my home. I'm not interested in selling." "But Mike," she pressed, "Jason really has his heart set on this neighborhood, and there aren't any other houses for sale right now. We'd pay cash, and you could find yourself a nice little condo downtown. Wouldn't that suit your lifestyle better?" "My lifestyle is just fine here in my house," I replied firmly. "I'm not selling. End of discussion." Karen's face darkened. "You're being very selfish, you know. A young family needs this house more than a single man. We'll talk again when you've had time to think it over." She turned and walked away before I could respond. I stood there in my garden, completely baffled by what had just happened. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Karen's campaign to get me to sell intensified. She started sending Jason over to chat about the house. He'd show up unannounced, asking to look around and talking about all the changes he planned to make. I started refusing to answer the door. Then the letters started arriving. First, it was formal offers written by Karen herself, offering significantly below market value but emphasizing how they'd pay in cash. When I ignored those, the letters got more aggressive, claiming they had legal priority to purchase the house because they were neighbors and suggesting I would regret not accepting their generous offer. I kept all the letters, sensing the situation might escalate. I was right. One morning, I found an official-looking document taped to my front door. It was styled like a legal notice, complete with fancy letterhead and threatening language. It claimed that due to neighborhood zoning regulations and family housing priorities, I was required to sell my property to an approved family buyer within 30 days. The document looked official at first glance, but something felt off. I took a closer look and noticed it was full of grammatical errors and cited non-existent local ordinances. The letterhead belonged to a fake law firm, Smith, and Smith Associates. I'm no lawyer, but I work with legal documents enough in my job to spot a fake. I immediately called my real estate attorney, Sarah, who I'd kept on speed dial since buying the house. "This is completely fraudulent," Sarah confirmed after I sent her photos of the notice. "They're trying to intimidate you with fake legal documents, which is actually illegal. Would you like me to handle this?" "Yes, please," I replied. "I'm tired of dealing with these people." Sarah sent a cease and desist letter to Karen and Bob, outlining the various laws they were breaking with their harassment and fraudulent documents. She also reported the fake legal notice to the State Bar Association. Instead of backing down, Karen escalated further. The next day, a man in a cheap suit showed up at my door, claiming to be from Smith, and Smith Associates. He tried to hand me another notice, this one threatening immediate eviction if I didn't comply with their demands. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Perfect timing. My security camera is recording this, and my attorney will be very interested in seeing you impersonate a lawyer. Would you like to tell me your real name, or should we wait for the police to sort this out?" The man's face went pale, and he practically ran to his car. Later that day, I saw him talking to Karen in her driveway. Turns out it was her brother-in-law, who worked as a real estate agent in another city. That evening, I was working in my home office when I heard a commotion outside. I checked my security cameras and saw Karen, Bob, and Jason in my front yard, placing a for sale sign in my lawn. I walked outside to confront them. What do you think you're doing? I demanded. This has gone on long enough, Karen declared. We're taking action to protect our neighborhood's interests. This house will be sold to Jason, one way or another. I pulled out my phone and started recording. You're trespassing on my property and making false claims about a sale that isn't happening. Remove that sign immediately, or I'm calling the police. Bob grabbed Karen's arm. Come on, honey, this isn't worth getting arrested over. You can't stop progress, Karen shouted as Bob dragged her away. Jason deserves this house more than you. I left the camera running until they removed the sign and left my property. Then I sent the footage to Sarah, along with all the previous evidence I'd collected. This is getting serious, Sarah said when I called her. They're moving from harassment into potential criminal behavior. I recommend we file for a restraining order and pursue civil action for harassment and fraud. I agreed, and Sarah got to work preparing the legal documents. Meanwhile, Karen seemed to think she could pressure me through other neighbors. She started telling everyone that I was destroying neighborhood property values by refusing to sell to a proper family. She even tried to start a petition to force me out, though nobody would sign it. The situation came to a head about a week later. I came home from work to find a moving truck in my driveway and Karen, Bob, and Jason attempting to enter my house with a set of keys. What the hell are you doing? I yelled, blocking their path to my door. We had keys made, Karen announced triumphantly. This house belongs to Jason now. We've already filed the paperwork. Filed what paperwork? I demanded, already calling the police. The transfer of ownership, Karen said, waving some official-looking documents. It's all legal now. You have to leave. I looked at the papers she was holding. They were crude forgeries of property transfer documents, complete with what appeared to be photocopied signatures from county officials. Hello, police? I said into my phone. I need officers at my address immediately. My neighbors are attempting to break into my home with illegally copied keys, and they're presenting forged property documents. Karen's face went from smug to panicked in an instant. She tried to grab the papers back, but I held on to them as evidence. Bob and Jason had enough sense to back away, but Karen started screaming about her rights and trying to push past me to get to my door. The police arrived within minutes. Karen was still ranting about how the house should belong to Jason, while I calmly showed the officers my legitimate property documents and the forged papers Karen had tried to use. Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted breaking and entering, forgery of official documents, and criminal trespassing, one of the officers announced, taking out his handcuffs. Karen's face turned bright red. This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to your supervisor. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, the officer continued, cuffing her while she struggled. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Bob and Jason stood there in shock as Karen was placed in the police car, still screaming about her rights and how unfair everything was. The officers took statements from everyone involved, and I provided copies of all the evidence I'd collected, including security camera footage and the various fraudulent documents. Sir, one of the officers said to Bob, I strongly suggest you get a lawyer. Based on the evidence we've seen, there could be serious charges coming for all parties involved in this attempted fraud. Bob nodded numbly, finally seeming to realize how serious the situation had become. He and Jason left quietly, and the moving truck drove away shortly after. Sarah arrived while the police were still there, and she was practically gleaming with professional satisfaction as she reviewed the forged documents. This is better than I could have hoped for, she said. They've handed us everything we need for both criminal charges and a civil suit. The forgery of county documents alone is a felony. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Karen was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted breaking and entering, forgery of government documents, criminal harassment, and fraud. Bob and Jason were charged as co-conspirators, though to a lesser degree since they hadn't been the primary instigators. During the investigation, we discovered that Karen had a history of similar behavior in their previous neighborhood. They hadn't moved so much as fled after trying to force another homeowner to sell through harassment and fraudulent documents. That case had been settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement, which was why I hadn't heard about it before. The criminal case was pretty straightforward. Karen took a plea deal to avoid maximum sentences, but she still got 2 years of probation and a hefty fine. Bob and Jason got lesser penalties, 6 months probation each and community service. All three were required to take legal ethics courses and undergo counseling. The civil case was where things got really interesting. Sarah was brilliant in documenting every single cost and damage their actions had caused me. We sued for mental anguish and emotional distress, legal fees and security system upgrades, lost work hours dealing with their harassment, damages to my property, from their various trespassing incidents, punitive damages for their intentional and malicious actions. The civil court judge was particularly unimpressed with their scheme to forge property documents. During the hearing, He said something I'll never forget. The right to feel secure in one's own home is fundamental to our society. The defendant's actions show a disturbing disregard for both law and basic human decency. This court intends to send a clear message that such behavior will not be tolerated. We won a judgment of $175,000, plus legal fees. Bob and Karen had to sell their house to pay it, which I admit gave me a certain satisfaction. They moved to another state, presumably to avoid the shame of facing the neighbors who had witnessed their behavior. Jason actually came to apologize to me after everything was settled. He seemed genuinely remorseful and admitted that he'd let his parents' influence cloud his judgment. "I should have stood up to them," he said. "I knew what they were doing was wrong, but I've never been able to say no to my mother. I'm sorry for everything we put you through." I appreciated his apology, though I told him he needed to work on setting boundaries with his parents. He nodded and said he was starting therapy to deal with exactly that issue. The aftermath brought some unexpected positive changes to my life. Several neighbors who had witnessed the whole ordeal became good friends, having seen how I handled the situation with patience and legal propriety instead of stooping to Karen's level. We now have regular weekend barbecues, and they've become like a second family to me. I also developed a closer relationship with my elderly neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Miller, who had been quietly supporting me throughout the ordeal. She told me she dealt with similar, though less extreme, pressure from Karen to sell her house and was glad someone had finally stood up to her. "You showed everyone that it's important to stand up for what's right," Mrs. Miller told me over coffee one morning. "Sometimes people think they can bully others into giving them what they want. They need to learn there are consequences." I used part of the settlement money to further improve my home security system and start a neighborhood watch program. The rest went into my savings and home improvement fund. I added a beautiful deck in the backyard where I now host those weekend gatherings with my neighbors. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. Document everything when dealing with difficult people. Invest in good security cameras. Have a reliable lawyer on speed dial. Stand your ground when you're in the right. Don't underestimate what entitled people might do. Most importantly, it reminded me that my home is more than just a building. It's my sanctuary, and it's worth protecting. No amount of pressure or intimidation should force anyone to give up something they've worked hard to achieve. Last week, I saw a for sale sign go up on Bob and Karen's old house. The new neighbors are a lovely young couple who brought me cookies when they moved in. They asked if I'd tell them the story of what happened with the previous owners, as they'd heard rumors from other neighbors. I told them the whole tale over dinner, and we all had a good laugh about it. They assured me they have no intention of trying to steal my house, and we've already planned several neighborhood get-togethers. Sometimes I still can't believe how crazy the whole situation was. Who tries to steal a house through fake documents and intimidation in this day and age? But then I remember that entitled people don't operate on normal logic. They believe they deserve whatever they want, regardless of laws or other people's rights. The irony is that if Karen had been a normal, decent neighbor, I might have considered selling when I eventually decided to upgrade to a larger home. But her actions guaranteed that I'll probably stay here out of principle, if nothing else. This is my home, and no amount of pressure will make me give it up until I choose to do so. My security cameras are still running, my lawyer is still on speed dial, and my new neighbors are wonderful. Life has a funny way of working out sometimes, even when you have to go through some crazy situations to get there. As for Karen, Bob, and Jason, last I heard, they're living in Arizona now. I hope they learned their lesson, but somehow I doubt it. I just feel sorry for their new neighbors. At least I know that if they try this scheme again, their history will catch up with them. Between the criminal records and civil judgment, they'll have a hard time convincing anyone they're innocent victims next time. For now, I'm enjoying my quiet life in my house, secure in the knowledge that I stood up for what was right and won. Sometimes that's all you can do. Stand your ground and let justice take its course. And if anyone else tries to tell me I have to sell my house, well, I've got a great lawyer and a file full of documentation showing exactly how well that worked out last time. Update: it's been 2 years since my crazy neighbors tried to steal my house. You won't believe what happened next. Hey everyone, I thought I'd give an update on the situation with my former neighbors who tried to force me to sell them my house through fraud and intimidation. A lot has happened in the past 2 years, and I think you'll find the conclusion interesting. First off, remember how Karen, Bob, and Jason moved to Arizona after everything went down? Well, it turns out they didn't learn their lesson at all. About 6 months ago, my lawyer Sarah called me with some surprising news. "Mike, you're not going to believe this," she said. "I just got a call from a lawyer in Phoenix. Apparently, your former neighbors tried their house stealing scheme again, but this time it backfired spectacularly. Turns out Karen and Bob had moved into an upscale neighborhood in Phoenix and set their sights on their new neighbor's house for Jason. But this time, their target was a retired judge. Yes, you read that right. They tried to pull their fraudulent property scheme on someone who had spent 30 years practicing law. The judge recognized their fake documents immediately and contacted the FBI instead of local police, since they had crossed state lines to commit fraud. This triggered a much larger investigation, which revealed they had attempted this same scheme in 3 other states before moving next door to me. The FBI found a pattern, Sarah explained. They would move into a nice neighborhood, target a single homeowner or elderly resident, and try to force them to sell through escalating harassment and fraudulent documents. They had success once in Florida where they scared an elderly widow into selling below market value. The FBI investigation led to federal charges for wire fraud, mail fraud, and interstate conspiracy. Remember that NDA from their previous attempt that I mentioned? The FBI got it unsealed as evidence of their pattern of behavior. I was called to testify about my experience, along with their other victims. It was surreal sitting in federal court, describing everything that had happened. The judge from Phoenix was actually there to testify too, and we ended up having lunch together during a break in the proceedings. "You did exactly the right thing by documenting everything," he told me. "Most people don't realize how important a paper trail is until it's too late." Karen and Bob's defense basically fell apart when their previous victims testified. Jason turned state's evidence against his parents in exchange for immunity, finally breaking free from their toxic influence. During his testimony, he revealed that this had been their retirement plan, forcing people to sell their homes below market value, then either flipping the properties or giving them to him while they moved on to the next target. The federal judge was not amused. Karen got 8 years in federal prison plus a $500,000 fine. Bob got 5 years and a $250,000 fine. They were also ordered to pay restitution to all their previous victims, including the widow from Florida. But here's where it gets even better. The FBI investigation revealed that Karen and Bob had hidden assets from our civil judgment. They'd transferred money to offshore accounts before the judgment was issued, thinking they could protect it. The feds found it all and seized it. Sarah filed to collect our full judgment plus interest, and this time they couldn't hide from it. Remember how they had to sell their house to pay my original judgment? Turns out they had only paid part of it before fleeing to Arizona. With the hidden assets discovered, I received the remaining balance plus 2 years of interest. Sarah also filed for additional damages based on their continued pattern of harassment and fraud, which the court granted. Jason reached out to me again after the federal trial. He's in therapy now and has completely cut ties with his parents. He's actually working with the FBI to help identify other potential victims of similar real estate fraud schemes. "I should have stood up to them years ago," he told me over coffee. "Their behavior was never normal, but they convinced me it was just being aggressive in real estate. I'm trying to make amends now." The whole situation also led to some positive changes in local law. Sarah worked with our state representatives to draft legislation specifically addressing real estate fraud and harassment. They're calling it the Homeowner Protection Act, and it increases penalties for attempting to force property sales through fraudulent means. My security camera footage and documentation were used in committee hearings as examples of how homeowners can protect themselves. I even testified at the state capitol about my experience. The bill passed unanimously and goes into effect next month. As for my home, I did some major renovations with the additional settlement money. Added a home gym, upgraded the kitchen, and installed a top-of-the-line security system. Old habits die hard. Mrs. Miller jokes that my house is now the most secure building in the neighborhood. The young couple who bought Karen and Bob's old house, Tom and Amy, have become close friends. We have dinner together at least once a week, and they're expecting their first child soon. They've asked me to be the godfather, which I consider a huge honor. "You're the reason we have such a great home," Tom told me. "If you hadn't stood up to those scammers, who knows what would have happened to this neighborhood." The Neighborhood Watch program I started has expanded to cover 3 adjacent neighborhoods, and we've had 0 property crimes in the past year. I still host those weekend barbecues, and they've turned into quite the community event. Last week, we had over 30 people in my backyard, including several local police officers who stop by regularly to check in. One unexpected outcome: my story apparently went viral in real estate law circles as a cautionary tale about fraud and harassment. Sarah gets invited to legal conferences to present it as a case study. She says it's become required reading in some law school classes about real estate fraud. "Your case is changing how people think about property rights and harassment," she told me recently. "It's showing that standing up to bullies and documenting everything can really pay off." The FBI agent who handled the federal case sent me a letter last month, letting me know that Karen and Bob's case helped them crack open a larger ring of real estate fraudsters who were pulling similar schemes across multiple states. Apparently, there's a whole network of people who try to intimidate homeowners into selling below market value. The investigation is ongoing, but several more arrests have been made. So here I am, still in my house, which is now better than ever. Karen and Bob are in federal prison, their fraud scheme is exposed, and their victims are getting justice. Jason is rebuilding his life and trying to make amends for his part in his parents' crimes. And I've got a stronger community around me than I ever expected. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about stopping bad people from hurting others. If I hadn't documented everything and fought back legally, Karen and Bob might still be out there targeting vulnerable homeowners. The whole experience has taught me that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, usually works out in the end. You just have to be patient, document everything, and let the legal system do its job. And if anyone else tries to pull this kind of scheme, well, there's now legal precedent and federal law enforcement specifically watching for it. Sometimes the best revenge is knowing that your stand against injustice helps protect others. As Mrs. Miller likes to say, a home is not just a house, it's a right that deserves to be protected. I couldn't agree more. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.